What's happening, everybody? We're going to be breaking down Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers. Going to be walking through this, building out lineups for both DraftKings and FanDuel using the Stochastic Sims, which if you guys want to sign up for, link below in the description box to sign up. We also did a giveaway yesterday, and we have a winner. It was which player who is not Luka Doncic or Anthony Edwards would score the most fantasy points in last night's Game 1 between the Dallas Mavericks and the Minnesota Timberwolves. And we had a lot of people that guessed Kyrie Irving in the chat. The winner, though, of all the people who guessed Kyrie Irving, it ended up being CZW, who actually not only guessed Kyrie Irving, but almost had the exact amount of fantasy points, also added that to his answer there. So CZW, hit me up on Twitter, send me a DM, and I'll send you over a link and a promo code to get you a free subscription to OddsShopper. And we'll do another giveaway today. For today, I'm going to do which player in the starting lineup scores the least fantasy points. It could be from either team. Celtics, Pacers, which starter scores the least fantasy points tonight? I'm going to pick one person who gets the answer correct, and you're going to get a free OddsShopper subscription. But let's go ahead and look at tonight's slate. And one thing I do want to also look at is the winning lineup from the Game 1 of this series, and just kind of give you guys a little bit of an idea of what the winning lineup looked like. Not to say that we should play the exact same lineup, but I do think there are some lessons to take away from that. And the winning lineup from Game 1, it had Drew Holiday in the captain spot, Tyrese Halliburton, Jaylen Brown, Pascal Siakam, Miles Turner, Obi Toppin, and the other utility spots. One thing that really stood out to me about that lineup is even though Jason Tatum was the highest scoring player on the slate, he was not in the winning lineup. Not just not in the captain spot, not in the utility spot either. So that is one thing that you will see happen in some of these solo one-game slates, is that even if one player goes out and scores a big game, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have them. And especially if we could find ways to get off some of those players because of ownership concerns, it could be the right reasons to go ahead and do that. So something to keep in mind as we're going ahead and building our lineups and looking at ownership for these slates. But let's go ahead and look at the lineups for today and what's maybe looking different in the Sims for Game 2 relative to Game 1, where we weren't really getting to much of Jason Tatum when we did the show the other day. But let's see. Starting off here with the highest overall Sim ROI lineup. And one thing of note here is that there isn't one lineup that's projected way better than everything else, which is something that we've seen on some of the other couple one-game slates where there's been a lineup that's had like a 250% Sim ROI and no other lineups over 200 or anything like that. Nothing that quite stands out to that extent today, but number one overall projected lineup, once again, does have Drew Holiday in the multiplier spot after he was the nut captain for Game 1. And then we've got Al Horford, Andrew Nembhard, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Pascal Siakam rounding out that lineup. No particular specific build stands out here. There's all different kinds of 4-2 Boston, 4-2 Indiana, 3-3s in here. It's not like one lineup build that looks better than anything else. If we go ahead and we look at the most duped lineups for this slate, and no surprise, none of the heavily duped lineups are showing up in our top Sim ROI lineups. But the number one lineup that's going to be played the most by the field, it looks like it is going to be Jason Tatum in the captain spot with Al Horford, Andrew Nembhard, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and Obi Toppin rounding that out. And yeah, a lot of these top lineups do have, and by top lineups, I just mean most duped lineups, not like top lineups to play here, but the lineups that are expected to have the most dupes, most of them do have Jason Tatum in the captain spot. Some of them have Jaylen Brown. I'm seeing one Miles Turner down here that uses all the salary. Here's a Tyrese Halliburton lineup that uses all the salary. But of the most heavily duped lineups here, Tatum captain, Tatum captain, Tatum captain, Tatum, 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 Brown, Tatum, Brown, Tatum. So you get the idea. It is going to be a little bit harder to build unique lineups with Jason Tatum at captain, same as it was with Game 1 of the series. Now, that's not to say that a lineup that's duped can't end up winning. There's a reason these lineups are duped really heavily, but you're only going to win or be in contention to win so many slates over the course of the playoffs. So when you are live to win, you'd rather it be with the unique lineup than a lineup that's duped really heavily. That's the reason we try to avoid some of these crazy heavy dupes. Let's go ahead and look at the exposures now, and we'll start by looking at the captain exposure. And yeah, once again, pretty similar deal to Game 1 of the series where we had Jason Tatum projected to be the most popular captain. Same case again today. There are still good lineups to be built with Jason Tatum at captain. It's just hard to get where the field is at on him. So he's projected for 38% ownership in the captain spot. I've got some good Tatum lineups here, but still only about a half of my lineups have the exposure Jason Tatum that the field does. So I like being underweight to the field on Tatum. As far as the players, I like being overweight to the captain at first look here. Drew Holiday, Tyrese Halliburton, most notably, each of them projected for single-digit ownership, so about 4x the field on Holiday, and then about 2x the field on Halliburton here. About even with the field on Jaylen Brown, and then about double the field on Pascal Siakam as well. So if you guys are playing, 1, 2, 3 lineups and you're trying to differentiate, I do think your best options to go to at captain are going to be Holiday, Tyrese Halliburton, as well as Pascal Siakam. In the flex spot, what are we getting to the most here? Drew Holiday also showing up in a bunch of lineups. So overall, that is nearly about 75% of my top 150 lineups have Drew Holiday in either the captain or the utility spot. So relative to ownership, he's looking like the best overall play on the slate, pretty similar to how he was projecting in game one. And then if we look at some of the other players here, Tyrese Halliburton is the spend-up option that I'm getting to the most of overall, and this also is across his exposure that I'm getting to him from the captain spot as well as in the utility spot. I've got, 46 plus 17. Yeah, so about 2/3 of my lineups have Tyrese Halliburton. He's my favorite overall spend up, and also getting a little bit of an ownership discount on him. He's 37% owned in the utility spot. Jason Tatum, 47% owned, and then also 47% ownership going to Jaylen Brown. So if you do get a scenario where Tyrese Halliburton outscores those guys, or at least is better than Tatum on a points per dollar basis, you got a pretty good chance of getting yourself a unique lineup with Tyrese Halliburton in it. So I like getting to Halliburton as a spend-up option. And then also Andrew Nembhard, only projected for 28% ownership. Not all that crazy high for a starting player. So Andrew Nembhard, he is showing up in about half my lineups here. He looks like somebody to be overweight to the field too. As far as contrarian options are concerned, here are a couple of single-digit owned players that we're getting overweight to. Luke Cornett, only 5% projected ownership in this game, getting to him in nearly 20% of lineups. And then Isaiah Jackson projected for 8% ownership. I have him in 12% of lineups. And I know the first game was wildly competitive. It went to an overtime. And I still think, though, we have to consider there's some blowout risk in this game. Celtics right around 10-point favorites. And while that was the case in game one as well, and I mean, the Pacers should have won that game. They completely fumbled it at the end of the game. I still think that if we're looking at these games, at least one of them, probably two over the course of the series, pretty live to be blowouts in the Celtics' favor. And that's a scenario where we could see somebody like Luke Cornett, or maybe even deeper, somebody like a Sam Hauser, stand out and end up putting up like 20 fantasy points in blowout run and end up being in a winning lineup. But my preferred garbage time player for today is Luke Cornett. He's live to play garbage time. And in addition to that, he's also somebody who's regularly a backup player for the Celtics that's normally in the rotation. So I like Luke Cornett as the really low-owned piece to be getting to today. As far as players that I'm underweight to, let's see. Obi Toppin, Miles Turner, Peyton Pritchard, TJ McConnell. Of all these ones, Obi Toppin is the one that I feel the best about being underweight to. And yeah, you'll see I have him in 33% of lineups, so he's projected for 52% ownership. Toppin is simply not playing a ton of minutes. He was crazy efficient last game from a points per dollar sense. I mean, from a points per minute sense, he ended up scoring, let's see, what was it? Pulling up the box score here. We got Toppin put up 15 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. He only played 21 minutes, though, and the game went to overtime, and part of the reason he got even more minutes was because Aaron Nesmith fouled out. I think the most likely scenario here is that you're getting sub 20 minutes from Obi Toppin, who's not a great points per minute, not a terrible points per minute fantasy producer, but not a great one either. He's going to be really popular, and he's probably going to be playing sub 20 minutes. You see, even here, we've got him projected for more than a fantasy point per minute. We've got him at 20.31 fantasy points, but that's still only enough for him to show up in a third of my lineups, and the field's getting him north of 50% of lineups. So I do like getting underweight to the field on Obi Toppin, and then also coming in a little bit underweight to Miles Turner, Peyton Pritchard, and TJ McConnell, like I referenced before. All the players were overweight to, kind of hit on all of them already, but Drew Holiday, Andrew Nembhard, and Luke Cornett, and then a little bit overweight to Al Horford here as well. I don't necessarily love Al Horford, but 30% projected ownership, it's a reasonable number to be overweight to for a starting caliber player in this kind of game. And Al Horford also looks like we can count on him for playing something like, 32 to 34 minutes. So let's go and look at some FanDuel lineups now. And if you guys haven't done yet, do me a big favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, help support our content a whole bunch. But we'll go back and look at FanDuel now. And I'm trying to remember. I think I built out FanDuel lineups already. Yeah. All right, so just restore those. What's the payout to first on FanDuel today? I know FanDuel's been doing contests that are a little bit more top-heavy. So let's see what I should set the percentage to first at. FanDuel's big GPP today, it is, 30% to first. We got the $150,000 prize pool with the $50K up top. So we'll set it to the 30% to first. That's the closest to mirroring the contest. And FanDuel is always going to look a little bit different from DraftKings. I'm curious to see what it is that stands out for this one. So one thing about the FanDuel slate the other day is that Jason Tatum did end up being a little bit more popular or a little bit more necessary on FanDuel than DraftKings because there is no multiplier for the salary. So in a situation where Jason Tatum scores the most fantasy points, it's harder to get away from on FanDuel than it is on DraftKings. But let's see what the ownership is looking like for today. There's always a breaking point in terms of ownership where you might want to go somewhere else because if somebody is like crazy popular, it could be very difficult to build unique lineups with them. But let's see, top 150 lineups. I am noticing Jason Tatum in a handful of these. One of the easy things you can do to differentiate a Jason Tatum lineup, leave some salary on the table. If you really are committed to playing Jason Tatum, and our number one projected sim ROI lineup does have Jason Tatum in the MVP spot, leaves a little bit of salary on the table. Also has Tyrese Halliburton, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, and Obi Toppin in it. Let's see, the most heavily duped lineups, which once again, none of them in our top 150, but this lineup is expected to be duped 170 times across the lineups that I built. And keep in mind, I built out 5,000 lineups. The main contest on FanDuel has a little bit over 10,000. So this is a lineup that looks like it's going to be duped somewhere around 400 times. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Obi Toppin, TJ McConnell. And all of these lineups that are most heavily duped, they all have Jason Tatum at the MVP spot. Tatum, all the way down. All of these lineups, all Tatum in the MVP spot. So let's look at exposures and what is our MVP exposure looking like where, you see here, Jason Tatum, he's the optimal MVP. If you're playing a cash game today on FanDuel, you're playing Tatum in the MVP spot. The problem is he's projected for 75% ownership as the MVP. And when we looked at all those heavily duped lineups that have Tatum, you're just not going to build very many lineups that are expected to be plus EV that have Jason Tatum in the MVP spot. So if you do want to be different there, Jaylen Brown, Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, those are the ways you'd be getting in the MVP spot. But if you are really committed to playing Jason Tatum, let's look at some contrarian options we could get to in the star and the pro spots that could differentiate a lineup. One that stands out here being underweight to the field on Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown project for 33% ownership in the star spot. And I mean, if the field is going to largely be going toward Jason Tatum in the MVP spot and then Jaylen Brown in the star spot, one other reason that it makes sense to be underweight to that build is because there's negative correlation there. If Jason Tatum has a big game, it kind of comes a little bit at the expense of Jaylen Brown and vice versa. So instead of playing somebody like Jaylen Brown in that spot, you could instead go to maybe Jrue Holiday or Derek White. While there are some of the negative correlations between these guys and Jason Tatum, there is still the opportunity for guys like Derek White, Jrue Holiday to be racking up a lot of assists, and that wouldn't hurt Jason Tatum quite as much. They're projected for 7.9 and 6.8% ownership each. Miles Turner, another decent-looking contrarian option in the star spot. Pascal Siakam, Tyrese Halliburton, getting to them the most, but about even with the field, where we've got them projected for 18.6 and 19.7% projected ownership. Very close to what I'm getting to in my top lineups. Pro spots here. Number one looking option to get to in the pro spot is Miles Turner. He's in 21% of my lineups. Field expected to have him in 13.5%. And then also Jrue Holiday, really popular here. This is another one of the spots where I think it makes some sense to play Jrue Holiday in the star spot as opposed to the pro spot. Another way you could differentiate a lineup. Derek White, he's about even with the field in my lineups. I'm surprised to see how much more popular Jrue Holiday is in the pro spot than Derek White, but I guess a big part of that is just field looking at what Jrue Holiday did last game and just wanting to play him more than Derek White. Other options here, nothing that stands out too much. I've got some other guys that have got some exposure, 11% Siakam, 9% Jaylen Brown, but once again, not all that different from the field on these individual guys. So let's look at the utility plays here to wrap up our FanDuel talk. The ones I'm getting to the most of, Aaron Nesmith, TJ McConnell, Al Horford, Andrew Nembhard, some of Obi Toppin as well. Although keep in mind, just like over on DraftKings, Obi Toppin projected for north of 30% ownership in the flex spot, so still underweight to him. And then TJ McConnell as well. He's expected to be crazy popular, 46% projected ownership. So with nearly half of the field playing TJ McConnell, while he is my second most rostered player in the flex spot, still I am underweight to him. So underweight to Toppin, underweight to McConnell. No other really big stands. I don't get to Luke Cornett quite as much on FanDuel as I did on DraftKings. Who are we overweight to in the utility spot? Overweight to White, Holiday. Andrew Nemhard looks like a pretty good contrarian option to be getting to in the flex spot. He's projected for 16% exposure, have him in 25% of lineups. He doesn't carry all that heavy of a price tag. So if you're looking for a way to save salary and get away from Obi Toppin, get away from TJ McConnell, Andrew Nemhard looks like a pretty good guy to go to. You could also make a case for Aaron Nesmith, who's projected for 28% ownership. So you're getting some ownership relief by going to Aaron Nesmith as well opposed to Obi Toppin or TJ McConnell. So that's a roundup of everything we're looking at for today's game 2 between the Indiana Pacers and Boston Celtics. Like, follow, subscribe if you guys haven't done that already. And also, don't forget, giveaway for a free OddsShopper subscription today. Let me know in the comment section which starter is going to score the least DraftKings fantasy points for today. And then I'll randomly select one person who gets the answer correct to win a free OddsShopper subscription. So, guys, thank you very much for watching. Later tonight, I'll be on NBA Live Before Lock once again with Eric Lindquist. That'll be from 7:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern time. And then I'll stick around for a little bit and watch some of the game with you guys on playback after that. So peace out. See you guys later and good luck tonight.